Peter McGraw knows how to make you laugh. Well, at the very least, he knows what it is about a joke that makes it funny. And joining us now to help crack the humor code in Boulder, Colorado via Skype, there's Peter McGraw. He's co-author of The Humour Code, a global search for what makes things funny. He's also the founder of Hurl, the humor research lab at the University of Colorado Boulder. And Peter, it's good to have you on the program tonight from the Rocky Mountain State. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I wish I could be up there in the Great White North with you.
Someday we will make that happen. Let me read a couple of quotes to get things started here. This is E.B. White in 1941, who once said, "Humor can be dissected as a frog can, but the thing dies in the process, and the innards are discouraging to any but the pure scientific mind." To which you and Joel Warner responded, "Let's kill some frogs." Okay, Peter, let's go there. Why do we need to take humor seriously?
Well, I think the most important reason is that it's just so important to us. People spend a good deal of their time pursuing it on a Friday night at a comedy club, watching a sitcom. They pursue it in their relationships, their friends, their coworkers, and then obviously it's an ideal characteristic in a life partner.
If you go back into history, do you have any theories as to how even the concept of humor began?
Well, yeah. So if you think about this really important process from an evolutionary standpoint, it should occur in animals. It should occur in our predecessors, and that seems to be the case. That the roots of humor are actually in physical threats and things like rough and tumble play fighting, and so on. You can see laughter, humorous reactions, not only in like infants and adults, but also in apes, bonobos, chimps, and there's even some evidence that rats laugh.
There is evidence that rats laugh?
There's some evidence, yeah, indeed.
Okay.
So if you take, so these scientists, Joel and I visited one in Chicago. You take these scientists and they have their rats. They put their hand into the cage and kind of tickle and play with the rats. They emit these ultrasonic chirps that are akin to human laughter.
Do you have any problems with some of these historical theories about how humor got started?
No, I think it actually gels with the work that we've been doing in the Humor Research Lab. The theories sort of recognize that there's this kind of potentially negative underbelly, no pun intended, to comedy. The fact is that we tend to laugh at, that we tend to be humored by things that are wrong but okay. That's what happens with play fighting, with tickling, at least the good kind.
Now, Peter, everybody always says no pun intended, but we're having a discussion about humor here, so fess up. You meant to intend a pun there. Come on.
I did.
Okay,
yes.
Okay, good. I'm glad we've got that out of the way. Tell me this. You know, so much of life can be demonstrated by using Venn diagrams, and I gather you've come up with the idea of using Venn diagrams to reflect something about humor as well. Explain that, if you would.
Yeah, so the idea that we use in the Humor Research Lab and that Joel and I explored along our travels for the Humor Code is this notion that the humor arises from benign violations, from things that are wrong yet okay. And my collaborator on the benign violation theory, Caleb Warren, and I decided to illustrate this visually with this Venn diagram, this idea that you have this benign appraisal and then this violation appraisal, and then that overlap there, when you can have both of those occurring at the same time, you get a humorous response. People feel amused, they say, hey, that's funny, and they laugh to tell others that situation is a benign violation.
Okay, give us a for instance of a benign violation that's cute.
Well, so Joel and I, on the Humor Code, we actually hung out with a bunch of advertising execs, and we decided to get them drunk to see if alcohol made them funnier. And they came up with a whole bunch of these benign violations, these Venn diagrams. So one that I think you just showed there a moment ago was pull my finger, fairly innocuous thing. And then obviously a really big violation, one that doesn't affect people in North America very often, leprosy. And according to our studies in the Humor Research Lab, people think that this is really, really funny.
Okay, what about that is, because there's nothing funny about leprosy, and of course, pull my finger is every 4-year-old's idea of the most exotic kind of humor going. So what's the sweet spot there that's funny?
Well, so the thing about that particular Venn diagram is that this is clearly not a real situation. That the idea that this would happen in real life is not something that the observer ever has to worry about or would ever be faced with. That helps create that kind of, this is safe, this is an okay situation. Clearly, if you had someone close to you who was suffering from leprosy, that joke would have fallen on the purely violation side of the diagram.
Gotcha. Talk to us about this experiment that was run at a University College London about the Tickle robot experiment. What's that about?
Oh yeah, so that's a very nice experiment. So tickling is an interesting case study for people who study humor, because it doesn't fit into the traditional theories. But from a benign violation approach, it works. So tickling is a harmless attack, and it's funny. It induces laughter when someone you trust does it. But when you try to tickle yourself, that doesn't elicit laughter because there's no violation there. There's nothing threatening about it. And in this Tickle robot example, they basically created this joystick that allowed you to tickle yourself. And what they found was, when they introduced a little bit of a delay, a little bit of a deviance from what you were doing with the joystick to what you were experiencing, they found that people reacted with some amusement there. It made it more threatening. It made it sort of more uncertain and kind of a situation which better mimicked when someone else was tickling you.
And that's what brings on the humor.
Yes.
Gotcha. Let's do another example here. You wanted to do a test by setting up a fake Twitter account for a hurricane. Tell us that story.
Yeah, so one thing that people often talk about is this idea of jokes being too soon, that it's hard to laugh in the face of tragedy. And we had this idea within the Humor Research Lab, something that Joel and I have talked a lot about during the Humor Code project, is when does it become okay to joke about a tragedy? And so we ran a study looking at how people reacted to potentially funny tweets in the days and weeks following Hurricane Sandy, a big tragedy that hit the New York metropolitan area. And what we found was, at first, the jokes were too soon. About 36 days later, they were considered optimally funny. And then what was interesting is that we found that as Hurricane Sandy faded and faded away in people's memories, and in terms of the threat that she had, eventually the jokes became too late. So you ended up having this sort of sweet spot where there's a perfect time to joke about it. There was a time too soon and a time too late. Too soon was a violation. Too late was just benign.
And 36 days was the sort of sweet spot.
At least for that set of jokes and for Hurricane Sandy, yes.
Gotcha. Because I think I remember Ricky Gervais hosting the Golden Globes one year in which he told a joke apropos of the Steven Spielberg movie about Abraham Lincoln that came out, and he told a joke about Lincoln's assassination, and everybody went, ooh, and then he said, oh, too soon, eh?
Yeah, and for some tragedies, even ones that happened a long time ago, it can still be too soon. You can think about slavery, you can think, or the Holocaust. You have to be a really adept joke teller if you're going to avoid those kinds of groans.
Apropos of that, I think I also remember Joan Rivers being interviewed once in which she said, I never tell jokes about the Holocaust because that's just something that's too profound ever to tell a joke about. Is that your understanding of that tragedy as well?
It depends on who I talk to. So Joel and I found comedians who believe that everything is joke worthy. So Key and Peele, popular sketch artist, actually just published an op-ed in Time magazine that said that everybody should be willing to be the butt of the joke, and if you're not willing to be the butt of the joke, it actually helps perpetuate oppression. Other people believe that good comedy is really reserved for the oppressor, is used to speak truth to power. And so I see both sides of it all. I tend to try to fall on the side of let's take down the big guy, the bad guy, the man, and let's leave the victims aside.
And thus, Jerry Seinfeld gets away with calling a character the soup Nazi.
Indeed, yes.
Got it. I want to talk now about the co-founder of the Improv Olympic Theater in Chicago, who's apparently run workshops for warring factions in Cyprus. You also, in the course of your research, discovered there are comedy outlets in Palestine. Is humor the key to world peace? Is that what you're saying here?
I wish. No, it's not. Diplomacy is usually going to win out there. But I think that in many ways, comedy is one of those things that can add value, right? So Joel and I found that during the Milosevic era, that you had these laughtivists, people who used comedy to not only criticize Milosevic, but also to muster support for the rebellion, because comedy is cool, because people want to be affiliated with funny people. They were actually able to turn these movements into something that was enjoyable, cool, something that people wanted to be part of. I think it had an effect, but clearly economic sanctions, troops, etc., usually win out over setups and punchlines.
Sure. Isn't there something related to a barrel that relates to this as well?
I'm sorry?
Is there something relating to a barrel that has something to do with this story as well?
Oh, yes, that's right. So these activists drew a picture of Milosevic on this barrel and then let people pay money to whack it. And essentially the government had a choice. Do they stop this and look like they can't take a joke, or do they allow it to continue and become the butt of the joke? It was a lose-lose situation for Milosevic.
Gotcha. Let me ask you about, I think public opinion surveys show this, that many people, probably millions of people, get their understanding of how the world works, in other words, get their straight news from comedy shows. The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, the Colbert Report. In this country, we have similar programs like This Hour has 22 Minutes. And that's how people get their real news and understanding of how the world works. What's your view of that phenomenon?
Well, I think it's certainly better than the alternative of not watching the news at all. So if you think about it, the news is typically populated by negative stories, by heartbreak, by the sad things happening in the world. And in that way, it can be really a bummer, a way to end your day. And these satire programs add a bit of levity. And in that way, I think it helps make a bitter pill go down a little bit easier. And so, there's some research actually that shows that the people who watch these shows are better informed than people who watch non-satirical programming. What you don't know, though, is it because of the satirical programming, or is it that better educated, more knowledgeable people just happen to enjoy Jon Stewart, Stephen Colbert, etc.
Right. We are, of course, at a moment in this city that I'm speaking to you from, in its history, where the mayor is known all over the world for reasons that perhaps a lot of citizens in this city wish he weren't so well known for. And I guess I should ask you, since you're a bit of an expert on humor, is Toronto Mayor Rob Ford funny?
Well, I think that making fun of larger-than-life characters, the people in the public eye, that there's a long history in North America for doing that, is that in many ways that we should have the greatest amount of free speech when it comes to our government officials, when it comes to people who have sort of given up their privacy in the hope for fame and fortune in the case of celebrities and so on. And certainly there's a long history of using comedy to critique our leaders. And so in that way, I think that the answer is okay. Yes, sure, go ahead. I think the difficulty with Rob Ford is that if you really take a moment to think about it and step back, it's actually a really concerning situation. It's one that you might actually have a hard time making jokes about because you're worried about this man's health.
Well, it's the association with underworld figures. It's the association with hard drugs. He is the staple of late night comedy, but you're quite right. There's a lot about this that isn't funny. How do we balance the need to want to laugh about this with the reality, which is a lot of it's not very funny, as he himself has acknowledged?
Yeah, and I think Rob Ford contributes this to this himself. He's willing to make the jokes. He sort of doesn't mind playing up the fact that there is some hilarity with all that's going on and his tenure as mayor there. I think that the average person on the street, whether they're laughing or crying, has no effect on Rob Ford. All things being equal, I'd rather see them laughing.
We know that some of the most beloved, let's take your country, presidents of the United States, were men who had a great sense of humor. And you can think about Ronald Reagan, you can think about John F. Kennedy. Do you think politicians would do or could do their jobs better if they took lessons in being funny?
Yeah, that is a tough one. I think that one of the things that we keep finding during the Humor Code project was the challenges of trying to be funny. And the idea is that when you try to be funny, you can fail in one of two ways. You can bore people, you can create this benign situation, or you can offend people. You create this situation that's just a violation. And given a 24-hour news cycle and the Twitterverse and social media running amok, one slip of the tongue by a presidential candidate, a senator, a governor, a mayor can reach, both sides of the country within moments. And in that way, it ends up being a tough situation. So in the United States, Obama recently appeared on Between the Two Ferns, this fake cable access show with Zach Galifianakis. I think a lot of people found it really funny. And then, of course, a lot of people ended up criticizing him for not being a serious enough president. It's a tough dilemma.
Did you think it was funny?
I did enjoy it. Yeah, I did enjoy it. It was fun.
I remember once upon a time doing an interview with one of the funniest guys I've ever met, Martin Short. And I asked him, do you know why you're funny? And he said, not only do I not know why I'm funny, but I don't want to analyze it lest I, lose whatever that magic is that I have. And I wonder if that's a part of this equation. If you analyze humor too much, do you run the risk of losing whatever inexplicable magic you may possess that makes you funny?
Maybe for the Martin Shorts of the world, the people who have really strong intuitions to begin with. But I think that the average person on the street, the person who might want to be a little bit funnier in their relationship or in a staff meeting, for them to understand this kind of complex or perplexing idea a little better, it probably is a bit worthwhile. So in Hurl, we talk about two strategies to become funnier. One is the Seinfeld strategy, the idea that you point out what's wrong with the world, named aptly after Jerry Seinfeld and his show about nothing. The other is the Silverman strategy, where you take what's wrong with the world and you find a way to make it okay, named after Sarah Silverman. If you can understand if you're more like a Jerry or more like a Sarah, that'll probably help a little bit in your day-to-day life.
Good
Pros
point.
don't seem to need our help, but you and I, we could stand a little bit of practice.
Hey, speak for yourself, buddy. I'm doing just fine here. All right, so we got 30 seconds left. Give me your best one-liner.
So this is an interactive joke. I'm not sure it'll work on camera, but we'll try it, okay?
Sure.
I want you to ask me, what is the secret of good comedy?
Okay, let's do that. Peter, what would you say is the secret to good comedy? Well played, sir. Well played. Okay, good enough. Peter, it's awfully good of you to join us on the line from Boulder, Colorado. Thank you so much. The co-author of the book, The Humor Code, A Global Search for What Makes Things Funny. Take care, and thanks for joining us on TVO tonight.
Cheers. Thank you.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.